Welcome to Modern Mind, Ancient Book, where we are going back to move forward. We're finding a love for the law, the prophets, and the writings. We're thankful that you're here. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us at modernmindancientbook@gmail.com. Today we're going to be discussing the interesting book of Ezra. I'm Roger, your host. We've got Nick here today, and Pete. Welcome, boys. How are you today?
Hey, doing good. Great. Glad to be here.
Good. So, again, we're kind of out of sequence, but in sequence with the book of Ezra, because it's placed where it's placed, the second to last book of the Bible, but technically it was the second group of people to return to Israel and before Esther. But it closed after Esther, the final portions were written. So that's why we're doing it today, and at this point, kind of more toward the end. So you've got in the timeline. So let's go back to 605 BC. We've got Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel. They're contemporary prophets. Then around 575, you get the kings of Persia. Persia starts to become a power, right? The first king who conquered all was in about 550, Cyrus. Next was Cambyses, and that was about 534. After that was Darius, about 516. Then Xerxes, which we remember from the book of Esther, was about 490. And then Artaxerxes, which is about 464. So the book of Ezra starts during the reign of Cyrus, and it's closed during the reign of Artaxerxes. So it's about 539 to 458, about 80 years roughly, right? So, and it's because he was the second wave to come back. The temple had already been built, and it had already been dedicated.
Right.
But now the people had to become Israeli again, Jewish again. And so there's this, just Ezra's absolutely important, right? So the title is named after the main character. It's Ezra, which is the Aramaic equivalent of Ezer, and it means to help. He's coming along to bring the people toward right understanding and toward obedience. Ezra's name means the Lord helps, or Yahweh helps. The book is about God's help in returning the righteous remnant to the land, and then God's help through the opposition, so that they can complete the rebuilding of the temple and renew their covenant. So I apologize, I misspoke earlier. The temple wasn't completed yet. It was still in process during the second. He was a help to come along to bring that about. So, Nick, authorship, what do we got here?
Well, it says that the book does not specifically mention Ezra as the author, but there is evidence to believe that he was the author. Major portion of the book, from chapter 7 verse 28 through chapter 9 verse 15, is written in the first person by Ezra, and it also includes copies of official documents that were given to Ezra, reference being chapter 7 verses 11 through 26. And it is written in the two languages of Aramaic and Hebrew, with the personal interaction with the other leaders and the eyewitness accounts of events that would indicate that the author was a person of Ezra's stature and leadership. And that's according to Nehemiah. So we got a little cross-referencing there, right, where they overlap.
Right.
And we're used to that. We saw the contemporary with Jeremiah, and Yep. So Ezra was one of the priestly lineage through Zadok. Yep. Phineas, Eleazar, and to Aaron. And he was a diligent student of the Word of God as he studied the law of the Lord and to practice it and to teach his statutes and ordinances to Israel. He was a man of great courage and faith and prayer. Ezra, Nehemiah, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles were originally bound together as one book, and I didn't know that before reading this, which contains the history of Israel from 1011 to 425 BC.
Yeah. So, and that's why Chronicles was both the first and the capsule. For us, it was the first.
Right. And reading this, it made sense. When I was reading this in preparation, it made, and we have talked about the reasons why they would separate them for ease of
just the
transport
scroll size
and
that kind of thing.
But it makes sense.
Yeah.
It spans all of that time, and they're related books and all the overlap.
For the Jewish canon, Chronicles is the last.
Right.
Not 1st and 2nd, but Chronicles.
Right. And we talked when we were talking about Nehemiah about the overlap with Ezra and how they were kind of in each other's portions.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. It's interesting to note that we've talked about this briefly. How at the Babylonian captivity, 7 years in Babylon, because Hebrew wasn't the main language.
70 years, not 7.
70. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yep. So Aramaic is the main language.
Yeah.
They've also taken on the role of this scribal idea, which is a very ancient Mesopotamian thing, and so we get all these documents. We get this great history from that ancient viewpoint of being a documenter. And it was actually considered a divine thing. The scribes of old were renowned people. They were very, very important people, divinely given position. And so, Ezra comes back, but he wasn't like the Babylonians. He wasn't like the Persians. He held more onto what we call the Torah, or the instructions of Moses, than many of the people, right? So when we read the book of Esther, we don't see a whole lot of keeping of the law. When we read the book of Daniel, we see a whole lot of keeping of the law. But we also get an image of Daniel being the chief magician, right? Adopting a very different way of life and being part of the king's court in that way. And, history shows that he created a whole other offshoot that took root in Persia, which led to monotheism there. And so, Israel's involvement, their ebb and flow, their religious practices, they just weren't the same through history.
No, they weren't. But there was an interesting blend here. I mean, we got that Mesopotamian idea of the scribes being revered in that way, but obviously that element did serve them well, right? We have Chronicles and we have all of the... So it wasn't without use. But it took Ezra to be unlike those people you're saying, leaning heavily into the Torah.
To come back.
In Nehemiah, we say he wasn't even born in the time of the things that he valued so greatly. But he was bringing them back to an earlier time, but the Lord allowed it. He had them blending in the more historical function, right? That they got from the Mesopotamians, but he was still like, but you got to do things the way that we did. Right?
That's right. What's mind-blowing to me is that this is not the first time Mesopotamian belief systems have entered this worldview. Because the creation narrative that we have in Genesis is very much Mesopotamian. Right? There's a whole epic of or what is it? No, it's Utinapishtim. Is that the epic of Gilgamesh? No, the Enuma. What's the name of it?
I thought you were going to say the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The flood story in Mesopotamian. Anyways, they have the heroes of Tunapishtim, and so he builds the book, he writes it out, and there's a whole. It's different, but it's the idea is there. Men are created from the dust of the earth. There's a whole thing, right? Yeah. And so, Abraham was Mesopotamian.
The Mesopotamian belief system was one of the first ones where gods interacted with humans.
Well, it was the very first belief system, right? I mean, the Mesopotamian river valley is where society, modern culture began. Right. Period. There's nowhere else. So, all of the surrounding nations had common beliefs, right? With variation. And Israel is very much that way.
Right.
It was the law of Moses. It was the Torah, the instructions that set them apart, and that's why it's such a hyper focus. And when we get to the intertestamental period, which we're gonna do an episode when we're done with the New Testament. We'll do kind of all the covenant framework of the Old Testament.
Right.
And we'll get to the intertestamental period and just mention some of the highlights of the things that happen and where you can find these things. And then that will take us into the New Testament after a few testimonies, right? Because the New Testament is miraculous. That's the whole point of the New Testament. But it's built on this foundation. So the instructions of God are what make Israel totally separate.
Right.
Even though there are shared commonalities in it, right? It's the instructions of Moses that created the nation. And so, and you see this all the way through it. Like, this Mesopotamian thing is from start to finish. That motif is constantly there. But then there's always this, God changed things for this specific little nation, who was more humble than anybody else. Right. So when the Assyrians came through, they were bringing order in God's name by killing and destroying.
Right.
When the Babylonians came through, they were bringing order in God's name by killing and destroying. When the Amorites came through, right? When the Elamites came through, when the Persians came through, it was all the same. Everybody had the same thing: order from chaos, order from chaos. Right. That's a shared Mesopotamian belief, and that's what the temple is all about.
Right.
It's bringing order to the people so that they might find the blessing of God by the forgiveness of sins and the keeping of His commandments. It's order from chaos, but it's a very much more humble people, a broken people, and that's really what sets Israel apart.
Right.
And that's very New Testament. So, okay, so the date on this one, Pete?
The book of Ezra spans a period of 81 years. That's a long time in that day and age, for 81 years, for anyone to be in that.
Yeah, it says a lot about the importance of keeping documentation throughout that period.
The writing of the book focuses on two time periods. First, chapter 1 through 6, from 538 to 516 BC, contains an account of the first return under Zerubbabel.
Yep.
And chapter 7 through 10 is 458 through 457 BC. Only a 2-year period there.
1 year.
1 year, basically. And contains an account
The second
return under Ezra. With the 48-year gap in between, it's silent. We don't hear anything about it.
The
it's
people
not
were busy.
mentioned.
Yeah,
Yep.
they were getting that was the work. Right? And then the culmination is that last 1 year.
1 year.
It not 48 but 58
8
years of reprogramming, of relearning, of bringing the second temple to life, of teaching the people, of becoming new. So to the listeners out there who are evangelistic, be patient, right? You work with, you talk to, you pray for people, but you got to give them 58 years, you know? It takes time, right?
Yeah.
We've got to be long view kind of people.
Right.
That's why we're going back to find a love for the law, the prophets, and the writings. God has been God since the creation of man.
Right.
And it's 2025 today, and He's still God.
Right.
And so we're just a vapor, but it's important for us to see how God has worked in history, how people have responded, in actually what it takes. It takes 58 years. And that's why Ezra is such an interesting book, right? Because you get this like flurry of activity, right? You get the story of Zerubbabel and Ezra about how he is a wise man. He impresses Darius, you know, and these are epigraphal stuff, right? But that's how he ended up getting the ability to come back and rebuild the temple. And then he goes back It's all disarray. Things are going on. Nehemiah's going crazy. There's people who want to kill him. All this crazy stuff. But the people were steadfast in moving forward, right? Then the second group of people come back with Ezra. Now we've got priests, we've got workers, we've got the right to rebuild this temple. It's this just amazing thing. And then it's silent for 58 years.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't all that amazing to start, and it takes considerable effort to achieve change. Right. You know? And the nation wasn't Israel anymore. Right. They had to re-become who they were. And this nation is very much an interesting nation for that reason. Right. They came out of Germany, no longer Israel. And then they went back and took the land. And today, they're hoping to rebuild the temple for a third time. These people love the instructions of Moses. Right. So we as Christians, knowing that Jesus was Jewish, we might want to consider it kind of important and spend our time going, why? And then, well, it's important to me too, right? Maybe. I think that's something we all got to work out. I know it's been very important to me. I'm 43 today. I went to Bible college starting in 2006. It's just now dawning on me that we need to go back to move forward.
Well, I hope all of our listeners are getting as much out of this as I am.
Yeah.
Because I like listening to you. See, you've got all this perspective that you're laying out in this, where I'm looking at the map of the overlapping of the prophets and everything, and almost thinking of it like a Wikipedia article of who's in the band at the given time. You got Jeremiah, Daniel, and Ezekiel. There's the staff change. Now we got Ezra, right? And he's got a little bit of overlap with Haggai and Zechariah, Esther, and then Nehemiah. Right after him, Micah comes in because there was this long gap, and it's like the old man's back in the band. Well, give him a tambourine, That's my warped mind, but continue.
Yeah, so for me, these kind of survey things are more about piecing together motifs, understandings, and bigger stories, right? Yeah. Because eventually we're going to go back again, and we're going to do the stories, right? And when we go into the stories, for me, it's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Especially having like that 10,000 foot thing that I've really been focusing on for like the last 15 years. Now when I go back in the stories, I'm like, wow. It just is mind-blowing. Jesus, I don't even know what to say about him. He just rocks my world. When I read the New Testament, all I see, all these memories flood through my brain about all these stories and how God was always there. He was just always there from the start to the finish in all of society. Now the question is do we really believe it? And how do you know if you don't know the texts? That's why we've got to move backward, learn it, and then go back forward and find it. And so, so the date, we had these two things that happened. We had a 26-year period that, you get a flurry of activity, and then a 1-year period that kind of closes it out, right? And so,
you kind of wrote like a postscript. I'm near the end of my time. Yep. Here's what happened.
Yep. Let's just get recap. Let's just tie this thing up now. Yep. We did the work. Let's tie it up now. So Cyrus the Persian had overthrown Babylonian rule in October of 539 BC. This began a period of benevolent rule in which Cyrus allows many captive peoples to return to their homelands and restore the temples to their gods. Israel was not the only nation that was allowed freedom again. This edict is contained on the Cyrus cylinder where he says Marduk let him do it. Struggle with that one, listener. So the first return under Zerubbabel begins, and the people start work on the reconstruction of the temple in 536 BC. Cyrus didn't waste any time. Within 3 years, the whole world was free to go be who they were before Babylon. The rebuilding of the temple stops in 534 BC due to opposition and complacency. Again, it wasn't all that great. It was very challenging. So construction begins again in 520 BC. 14 years of not touching that Temple Mount before it was allowed again. Now, Rome destroyed the temple in AD 70. They haven't touched the Temple Mount since then, but they have everything ready to do it today. That's the audacity and stick-to-itness of Israel, right? They are a phenomenon, a people who are favored. I'll put it that way. The rebuilding of the temple stopped. Okay, so there we go. So 520 BC, under the prophetic encouragement of Haggai and Zechariah, the Persians expanded their empire by defeating the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon. Right, everybody knows this one. That's the movie, the 200 or whatever, right?
The 300.
Yeah, 300 or whatever.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. So 490 BC, Egypt takes the opportunity to revolt against the Persians while their military is occupied in battles that are thousands of miles away. In 486 BC, King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus of Ezra and Esther, invades Greek and defeats the Spartans at the Battle of Salamis. That's the 300, right? This unites the Greek city-states, and they were able to destroy his naval fleet in Salamis in 480 BC. This forces Xerxes' troops into a retreat with the policy of destroying and scorching the land behind them. If I can't have it, no one can. He returns to his capital and takes comfort and solace in his women, his harem. This leads to the events of the book of Esther. Okay, so it wasn't before, it was after, right? So 474 BC. Haman seeks to destroy Mordecai and the Jews through his deception of Xerxes. Xerxes issues a decree that allows the Jews to defend themselves, resulting in the defeat of their enemies in 473 BC. Nehemiah rises in power to the number 2 position within the royal court in 464 BC. The second return begins under the leadership of Ezra in 458 BC. The Jewish people had to get power. They got power by this miraculous thing in Esther, which is in the Bible, but doesn't make sense that it's in the Bible, except for that God divinely protects them. But that divine protection led to Jewish people being in high areas of the court, which in turn then led to them to be able to rebuild the temple. Again, there is a divine thing, and it happens over lifetimes and lifespans, over many, many, many years. So, the second return begins with, okay, there we go. So the ministry of Malachi, which is the next book we're going to do, encourages the people to repent of their transgressions and complacency in 450 BC. Nehemiah leads the inhabitants of Jerusalem in the rebuilding of the temple and city walls of Jerusalem in 445 BC, just 5 years before. So, the temple's being built, but there's not a whole lot of adherence to the Torah, because the people are still not quite in Judaism.
Right, they're not all in.
Right? There's a fair amount of error that came back also.
Right.
And that follows through for quite some time. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Right? So, the recipients, Nick?
First recipients were probably the people who had returned under the leadership of Ezra, and the new ones who were arriving under the leadership of Nehemiah. They had been born and raised in Babylon under the oppressive rule, but had been liberated by the Persians and allowed to return to the land of their ancestors, which was the land that Yahweh had promised to them. But they are not familiar with the temple services, the sacrificial system, priestly robes, or the law of Moses, so they must be taught about the importance of the Word of God. They have to be educated about their covenant responsibilities and have the courage to rebuild the temple, the city walls, and the red gates, which is what we were talking about, right? So they've got this outside influence. We talked about the Mesopotamian, whether some of that was beneficial, but a lot of it obviously wasn't. They had lost all this. And then we had talked about with Nehemiah, all of the sort of what we would consider natural, although they didn't have the separation of, they didn't have their homes convenient, you know, and then they're supposed to be working on this. Their priorities weren't straight in that either. And I remember you saying last time, Roger, that it was like, you know, do you love the Lord and serve the Lord? Then get His house ready first, and you can worry about
your house will be ready too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when God's blessing is there, when sin is forgiven, you are safe.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, you're just spinning your wheels.
But if we're honest with ourselves, we can see how we could easily fall into that.
Oh,
if we didn't learn this lesson.
Yeah, 1,000%. I actually wanted to talk about the state or the pressures of being these people, right? So you speak Aramaic. Most of these people were probably born in captivity. They were mostly Babylonian, except for what your parents taught you, right? Because these are faithful people. I mean, they kept the Shema, right?
Yeah.
Talk about these things, teach these things, right? So they were obviously still Jewish, because Jewish people just don't give it up.
Right.
But an odd mixture of it. And so they come back to this destroyed place. You're attempting to be brave, but when you get there, people want to kill you again, right? So you're celebrating this anointed Cyrus character. You're celebrating God's provision, and then you get there and it's just hard work. But not only is it hard work, it's also wartime hard work. And Cyrus,
it's hard work under adverse conditions.
Yeah, really adverse conditions. And then you get people lying about you to the Persians, and they believe it for a moment. So imagine this. So Israel has a history of failing to fall in line with other nations' belief systems and practices. And this is known in the region. That's why the Assyrians attacked them. That's why the Egyptians attacked them. That's why the northern 5 Hittites attacked them. That's why Babylon attacked them, right? So they got this reputation. Now, the Persians are just being benevolent. They haven't looked at reputations. They're not concerned about it. He believed that on behalf of the creator of heaven and earth, he was to allow the people to be as they were. But then, some little nagging voices go back to Persia, and they say, these people will supplant your power. These people have a history of this, O king. Look in the annals of the king. And then he goes and looks, and he says, well, they kind of do not really align themselves real well with other powers. And then he comes against you. But then it gets turned over again. Right? So, I know that the modern mind can understand when you get a great job and you're super happy, and then you get fired. You know? Yeah. And then you get the next job and you're super happy, but you're always worried if you're going to get fired. You know, you've got this thing hanging over you. Right. Now imagine if it's life and death in a place that you don't even know if you're going to be okay because you don't have a temple to get your sins forgiven. These are very spiritual people. Right. There's not a difference between heaven and earth. It's all one. And this is the land that is God's. And you're there. But you've been exiled from it. And you're feeling this. And it's going good, and then it's going bad. And it's going good, and then it's going bad. And you don't know which way's up or down. But you're also being exhorted, in some cases beaten by your people for not doing the right things. Right. They had to put away their foreign wives. They had to get divorced. They had to give up their families. I mean, this was like tumultuous. Very challenging. Very, very challenging. And this is, again, we're going back to move forward for this very point. We have to, as faithful people, align ourselves. If you are religious, right, and we are, all three of us in this room are Christians, we were grafted into the roots. We were wild olives. Yeah, we've been grafted into the olive tree, right? And so this is something that we really should take to heart, because these are our people, because they're God's people. They're our God's people. He's the kingdom that we are under. I am not American. I am of the kingdom of heaven. My Father is the King of forever, and He is my King. I am not under President Trump or any president here. This is not my world. So I want to align myself to have sympathy and understanding for my people, for my past, what my God has done for my people. And these are my people. This is my history of faith. This is my kingdom. And so when these people go through these things, we can't overlook this. We have to learn to identify with it and see how God brought them through and taught them within the confines of these very difficult things so that we know what to expect when our God brings us in and out, right? That's what going back to move forward is through these texts. So I wanted to labor that because we're in the big motif part right now, right? Okay, so how do you want to read this? You've traveled hundreds of miles to return to the promised land of your ancestors. You've been brought up in an idolatrous country under Gentile domination. You've been liberated by a benevolent Persian king, and you are returning because the Lord God has stirred your heart to renew your national and covenant obligation. The covenants are a huge motif. It's absolutely central. In whose name are you known? That's the question that permeates the Bible. You do not know how to live as a covenant citizen under the theocratic rule of God. You want to learn from the successes and failures of your ancestors. You want to know the history of those who returned before you. You must set yourself apart to the Lord God. You must learn not the law, the instructions, the wisdom of Moses, so you can walk in the statutes of your God and be pleasing. You must renew the covenant with the Lord so that he can bless you in the promised land. So this is the point of the Bible. God has created men. Men are to be his in covenant and relationship. One with God, were made in his image. And throughout the history of men's failing to act correctly, he's continually reached out and sought our agreement to his desires by creating agreements with us. That's what a covenant is. And so Israel is absolutely our image of what it is and what it takes to be faithful even after we fail. That's what Ezra's all about.
Right.
What's the argument, Nick?
Commitment and consecration to Yahweh's covenant in spite of foreign influence will bring blessings of the kingdom to the nation again.
And purpose, Pete?
To encourage faith in Yahweh's promised covenants in view of his faithfulness in restoring them after the 70 years of captivity.
That's right. And the key verse is Ezra 9, verse 8. But now, for a brief moment, grace has been shown from the Lord our God to leave us an escaped remnant and to give us a peg in his holy place, that our God may enlighten our eyes and grant us a little reviving in our bondage. The restoration of the people. Not all the people, just a remnant.
Right.
Not everybody went back.
No.
And why would they?
Yeah, they
The
were
Persians
had
let it
it good.
Yeah, you could eat well, right?
Yep.
To go back was to suffer,
Right.
but they did it anyway. I find that very encouraging. Good book. Anybody got anything else to say?
We might want to talk a little bit about the difference between a law and covenant. Law is something that's enforced. Covenant is something you willingly enter.
You know, I'm actually really glad that you say that. Is that your opinion too? Is law enforced? Tell me what you think of law. Define that for me.
Way to put people on the spot, right?
Yeah,
No,
man.
yeah.
Well, Pete did it.
No, he did.
Yeah.
You brought this up. See, and that was better than what I
Right.
thought, because I'm thinking you were talking about, we're the wild olives grafted into the trees.
Right.
I'm thinking I must be a Greek olive, but anyway.
I'm a Scottish olive.
No, that's fine. Well, now we're asking two separate questions. Though. Is the law enforced it depends on what you mean by enforced. Because there are consequences, right, to disobeying the law, but if the law was automatic, we wouldn't now be having to go back and struggle with this, right?
That's right.
You know?
It's a struggle.
It is. And then the second question was,
what's the difference between a covenant and enforcement of the law?
Covenant. Right.
A covenant you enter willingly.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, that's to me more easily defined because God puts the offer out there and then you hold up your end.
But the law is difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
we don't like laws.
Well, the thing is I don't think we ought to biblically call them laws.
Right.
To be quite honest,
that wasn't their the way that we use the word law was not in the same connotation.
That's right. You know where law comes from? The Septuagint, right?
Yeah.
So the word nomos is law, and it's we have adopted with our Western minds the Greek idea of nomos.
Exactly.
Right?
That's why I said I'm a Greek olive because I'm thinking law like speed limit. Like
that's what we see law as.
Right.
But the commands of Moses. So let's just go back to Exodus real fast, okay? So the people come out of the land, they get the 10 Commandments, and then what else follows? All sorts of additional things follow, right? So if a person has a sore and it turns white and you go outside of the camp for stuff, you wash, you go, right? And not that this is totally foreign, because when we get a disease like COVID and you stay in your house for 7 days, that's exactly what that is.
Right.
It's no different, right? But the point is that it is the human condition and God's working within the confines of it, right? So technically, it's instructions and wisdom from God and in God for his people, right? It's not so here's the other problem. People are so hard that, like Jesus said, right? Moses didn't permit you to divorce, but he gave it to you for your hardness of heart, right? So we're supposed to join together and become one. But then we hate each other, so we divorce, right? But God never wanted us to hate each other. He just wanted us to love him and be loved by him and be there and be just fine, right? We were supposed to just make babies and enjoy those babies and eat food and fellowship with him, and it'd be great. But instead, we kill our own brothers because in our really finite, really humble bodies, right? We don't live long, we don't know much. We're not super capable, but we think we're like God. That the stem of violence is pride in self, right? Why would you do that to me? Why didn't I deserve it? Why didn't you, how could you disrespect me? That's the stem of it. And so God gives us wisdom and instructions to try to mitigate that. Sin is crouching at the door, desires to have you, but you must master it. And so Moses first just had 10 laws, and then they became 614 mitzvot over time. And they did become hard. When Jesus was walking through the field and they plucked grain, right? The Pharisees said, "How dare you work on the Sabbath?" He said, "Didn't you hear what David did when he ate the showbread?" Right? That was just for God, but he ate it. And they're like, "Well, it's evil, But the thing is that law isn't for God, it's for man. Because it's not law, it's instructions, it's wisdom. So, for 58 years, God was patient with the people while they rebuilt the temple and learned how to do it. How much sin was present before sin was forgiven?
Right.
That's what the instructions are for. For 58 years, the people had to learn to be different. That's what the instructions are for.
Right.
And so, same theme that we're doing right now, right? We are not going back to learn the law so that we can be hard on people. We're going back to learn the instructions and wisdom of God and how people failed it and how long it took them to recover from it and the consequences from it. and how they did really good by doing it and the blessings that were associated with it, so that we can learn how to be a good family member to our Father in heaven and to one another in the ways that people are. So the Pharisees went too far, and Jesus said, you tie a heavy burden, and that's wrong. But the people get too relaxed, and they say, you don't even care about me because you do nothing that I want. You go and you chase after other gods, and you burn your children, and you drink blood, and you commit fornications, and you know, right? So there's a happy medium with God. And this is what I think the happy medium is. The thief on the cross. He didn't want to know. He didn't want to be anything different than he was. He didn't need to know that Jesus could take himself off the cross. He didn't feel the need to attack him. Instead, he just went to him and he said, I know I'm not like you. I deserve this, but you don't. Will you remember me? And Jesus said, I tell you the truth, this day you'll be with me in Eden. So, the instructions, when rightly used, should bring us to a greater understanding of what it is that God desires for us. He wants us to be clean from the world. He wants us to be set apart from the world. He wants us to be great neighbors, not good neighbors. He wants us to be very moral. He wants us to honor other people, their wealth, their families, their things. He doesn't want us to look at women and lust after them. He doesn't want us to want our neighbor's stuff. He doesn't want us to hate and murder. He doesn't want us to misuse wealth, right? And all of that is contained in the wisdom of God, which is the instruction of Moses. But it's not for condemnation as much as it is for us to learn why we're condemned. If that makes sense, it's a big distinction with a big difference. So, does God go around judging us? No. He didn't give us Jesus on the cross so that we could die. He gave us that so we could live according to the law by satisfying the requirements of the law. Okay? So that is the difference. God wants us to have life by being wise and being kind and being caring. Jesus summed it up this way. The whole of the law is like this. Love your neighbor as yourself. Right? What else you got? It's not that complicated. It's not a speed limit and a sign and a police officer. God's not waiting to pound your face in and put you in prison and cut your head off or stone you to death. He's looking at you going, I wish you would just not do that. I don't want to condemn you. Right? So here's my son. Would you just be like the thief on the cross and go to him? That would be good for you. Or you can argue and carry on and hate one another and divide yourselves and call yourselves the church, but there's 40,000 denominations. Or you could on Friday night talk about me and celebrate creation and teach your kids those things and be very kind to the people around you. That's the whole of the law.
Right.
So, what is a covenant now? A covenant is where God comes down and agrees to something with us when we don't deserve it.
Right.
That's what a covenant is. There's been no covenant made by man, not in the Bible. Every single one of them is at the behest and the leading of the creator of heaven and earth. And all of them have their stipulations, which I can understand why maybe perhaps the listener might say, yeah, but you're just making it too rosy. Well, there is the description of what happened,
Right.
and there's the commands of God. The description is most often not what God wanted. Right? And that takes wisdom to divide and understand that. And perhaps I am biased, right? But I'm happy being biased because it's what brings me peace and stops me from going crazy when it comes to a right or a wrong. Point in case. The Cyrus cylinder says that Marduk gave Cyrus the commission and the desire, and he was divinely inspired to do those things. In the Bible, it says that God anointed him as a Messiah figure, a Mashiach, to do these things.
Right.
So, which one's in error? Or is there no error? Because God can speak through anything and for his good, even if it's done in a wrong name. Right? I want to be the grace person because Jesus was the grace man. When he was on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, when they were getting ready to shove a spear in his side. I don't want to be the guy that shoves the spear in. I don't want to be right. I want to be okay with my God. And that takes wisdom. It takes understand. You got to understand the instructions, right? You got to take them out. You got to take them out of the law moniker, and you have to put them in the what's useful and wise about it. How does it apply? Let's see how it applied in its historical culture, and then does that apply today? And you would be shocked to learn that all of these things apply today, and they're very good. We just have to learn why, and we're gonna do that eventually.
So we hope that you've enjoyed this bonus episode. If you'd like to get in touch with us, modernmindancientbook@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Have a great time. Night, day, morning.